The panel will be moderated by Ambassador Mary Ann Glendon, who is the Learned Hand Professor of Law at Harvard Law School and a former U.S. Ambassador to the Holy See. She currently serves as a member of the Board of Supervisors of the Institute of Religious Works, which is the Vatican Bank. Professor Glendon is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences and served as president of the Pontifical Academy of Social Sciences from 2003 to 2013. Her books include The Forum in the Tower, Traditions in Turmoil, A World Made New, Eleanor Roosevelt and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, A Nation Under Lawyers, and Rights Talk. I present Mary Ann Glendon.
Thank you. These wonderful talks this morning have confirmed impressions I have formed over about 40 years of what I've learned from Father Rutler is fishing in an aquarium. And in my case, I would have to say an aquarium that has some carefully selected fish, young men and women who have really mastered the art of going to school. They're very good at going to school. And so it's been a matter of some concern to me over the years to see a decline in the knowledge of future lawyers, many of whom will become leaders in business and government, a decline in their knowledge of American history of all things. I was glad to hear the question about, or the statement about Thomas Jefferson. Students know the darker sides of his history. They don't know anything about the founding documents. One of my friends, an elderly lawyer in a Boston law firm, said the other day, apropos of the kind of history we're getting, it's tough times for the dead. So it's been a matter of concern to me to see the decline in knowledge among law students of the structure of American government, and it's also been sad to see the decline in their exposure to great literature. And there are, of course, exceptions. Thankfully, there are exceptions. And one of the exceptions, as I get to know some of these students, is among the students who have been homeschooled. And that prompted me to think this morning as I was listening to the questions that we are all of us parents and grandparents, we shouldn't forget that maybe the most important form of schooling is homeschooling, and our job as homeschoolers is more important than ever now that the other schools are letting us down. These homeschoolers, they have good educations, at least the ones that I encounter who've gone through the hoops to get where they get. But the other exception, and the one that is pertinent to our program today, is I still get many students who have had what we would call a good Catholic education. And we all know that that is imperiled even in the Catholic schools, but thankfully there are some places where it is being preserved. There are so many experts here that I'm going to go right to introducing to them, but I have just one thing to throw out to the audience and the panelists, which comes from the angle at which I look at many of these problems. I do a lot of work in defense of religious freedom, which of course is very much involved with education issues. And I came across, in John Stuart Mill's essay on liberty, I came across in the last chapter of that essay, the one that nobody reads, people who oppose the issues that I'm involved in on religious freedom, this is their Bible, the essay on liberty. But they never get to the last chapter where John Stuart Mill talks about education. And I thought I just might share this with you as kind of ammo that you might want to use if you ever get into discussions of education and freedom. John Stuart Mill says that the whole or any large part of the education of the people should be in state hands. I go as far as anyone in deprecating. A general state education is a mere contrivance for molding people to be exactly like one another, and as the mold in which it casts them is that which pleases the predominant power in the government, in proportion as they are efficient and successful, it establishes a despotism over the mind, leading by natural tendency to one over the body. That's pretty powerful stuff. So you just file that away, chapter 5 of the Essay on Liberty. Now, I would like to turn to our wonderful panel. I was told that I had to keep the introductions short, but I'd just like to say collectively that how fortunate we are that we have 4 of the most experienced and learned people on education with us today. So we will start with, bear with me here because there's a certain order to this. We will start with my good friend Karen Bolin, who is head of the Montrose School, the wonderful Montrose School, and she is senior scholar at Boston University's Center for Character and Social Responsibility. Karen.
Thanks so much, Mary Ann. And thank you. What a pleasure to be here. It's really been an inspiring morning. I had no idea I was going first, but I'm delighted to open this panel with my colleagues because I think what is so central to the flourishing of Catholic education is this idea of children and young adults being grounded in a clear understanding of who they are and who they're called to be. This is really what parents, what educators who have a conviction about the great mission, the awesomeness of a young person's life. And when I think about my students, I teach girls. I had a school in grades 6 through 12, so I get them at middle school and high school. It's really a pivotal moment, and they are bombarded with information. You know, we're information rich. What they desperately need is formation, is grounding, is anchoring in a clear sense of identity, of personhood. I loved Paul's remarks about person is central because it's John Paul II who say we're unique, unrepeatable, and called by God to do something great. And if we can instill that in our homes and in our schools and young people, it sets them on their journey. It sets them searching not only within themselves, but in the great literature, the history, as they develop those powers of mind, that intellectual virtue that they need to unlock and enjoy and encounter the liberal arts and all of their richness. They know that they're fundamentally on a journey. They've got a purpose. And when you know that you're a child of God, when you know that your Father is this unconditional love for you, when you know, too, that you're vulnerable, you're weak, but that there's this incredible grace available to you, you can surmount obstacles. You can have the kind of resilience that enables people to turn around in very difficult circumstances. And we see this not only in the liberal arts, but in the lives of the saints. And you know, young people are underserved in schools today, and also in Catholic schools that lose their sense of confidence in who we are and our rich tradition, our rich identity. They're underserved when we fail to give them this tremendous vision for their life, this tremendous promise and potential. So I think the real hope that we have in Catholic education today is to bring the story, the richness of the tradition, is to bring the narrative, the experience of what it means to be a Catholic to a whole new level. And then young people can see, they see in the lives of their teachers, they experience it in the kind of relationships they have with coaches, with their parents, with their peers. When they learn to respect the fundamental dignity of every human person, they can talk to anyone. They don't need safe spaces. They can engage anyone regardless of their divergent viewpoints, perspectives, backgrounds, because they see that glimmer of light. They see that this person is another child of God. And this is where I think Catholic education can really serve the common good, the public square, whether a child is homeschooled, whether a child is in a Catholic school. What matters most is how that education transforms them and inspires them to go out on a mission. And this is the greatest gift we can give young people, so that they can go anywhere. They can be in any environment, and they've got a compass. They've got an intellectual compass, a moral compass, and a spiritual compass. And they can be in the field hospital, meeting people wherever they are, and bringing them to the love of Jesus Christ, bringing them to an exploration of the truth, whether it's in science and engineering, in the entertainment industry. I'm so inspired by what our graduates do with their lives. And not every single one of them stays and practices her faith from the day after graduation, but many will return. They'll return later because of the solid foundation that was laid, because of the reasonableness of Christianity, because of the lives of the people who loved them and trusted them when they were most vulnerable and rebellious and difficult to communicate with. There's something in them when they have that moment in their personal life or professional life. They come back. They come back to the people. They come back to the truths that inspired them for advice. They come back to their chaplains. They come back to the sacraments. And this is why I think what matters is a transformation in Catholics, lay Catholic faithful, to take on this evangelical witness, whether we teach in a public school, an independent school, or a Catholic school, because this is what is so transformative, is young people seeing the power of the gospel lived in every particular field, in every classroom, in sports, in arts and sciences, and they see that they're not separatists. They're not called to be sort of, apart from politics, entertainment, social life. They're called to be leaven, to be light, to be anywhere, and to be a real source of joy and optimism. And so I think that if we imbue our schools with a Christian realism, we know who we are, we know where we come from, our family is extraordinary, our riches are great, we will be able to build up Catholic schooling again, because people will see the promise. They'll see the incredible respect we have for parents and for children. They'll see the rich resources of the sacraments, and there'll be a resurgence. So that's my sort of plea. I'm giving you my headmistressy sort of invocation. There's so much hope, and it's really up to us to turn the tide of Catholic education in this country.
Thank you, Karen. And now we're going to hear from the Superintendent of Catholic Schools for the Archdiocese of Boston, Kathleen Mears. Kathleen.
Thank you. That was great, Karen. I agree with all of that. I could almost say ditto. There is so much hope in Catholic education today, and I want people to understand that, because the headlines are always negative. Always. It's always about the number of schools closing or the decline in enrollment. But there is so much good going on. I think we are reclaiming the fact that we are Catholic. I do think some of our Catholic schools have ran from that a little bit in the past. We are reclaiming our faith. We're saying we're Catholic. The word Catholic comes before school. It is primary. There's no reason for the church to have schools if it is not to share the faith with our students and help them develop that faith. I personally believe, and I think our church believes, that we have to work in partnership with our parents, and that we need to do a better job of that. As you said, I'm a new grandmother too. We have work to do with our own children, grandchildren, and helping them. But we can take on that job. That's a job of joy. And the joy that we find in our schools is so clearly evident. So we are looking in Catholic education to form children and not just inform them. And we do this through the liberal arts, and we do this through everything that we try to do when we do service projects, when we teach them about Christ and the grace our church offers them through the sacraments. We do this every day, and we do it well. We're not perfect, but I think that we're on the road to getting even better. And I believe that there are so many new models across the country, including more classical Catholic schools. We are very open to that in Boston, and I know other places are around the country. We realize that right now faith among Catholics, practicing Catholics, is down a bit, in that fact that church attendance is down and number of vocations are down. But again, we know that children who attend Catholic schools are more likely to consider a religious vocation. They're more likely to attend Mass. The church needs our schools. So the hope is that people realize this, and the hope lies in Jesus, who provides us with the resurrection and everlasting life. And we count on that, we trust in that, and we believe with the hard work of our teachers and leaders that we're going to continue to get better, especially here in the Archdiocese of Boston. I can tell you that our teachers are living what St. Theodora has taught us all. When she said to a teacher who was struggling with children who she said were incorrigible, didn't do their homework, and their parents didn't care, she wrote about 150 years ago that what you must do is to love the children first, then teach them. And that theory, that model is alive and well in Boston. We are loving our children, and we are teaching them. We are giving them the discipline that they need to succeed. And I just think that's what's happening across the country. Although in the Midwest and Northeast, we have some schools closing, we have declining enrollment a bit. In other parts of the country, it's growing. It's just up to the church. Do we have the will? Do we have the will as a church to fully support the schools and to keep them moving forward? Because if we do, we will be fine, but it's going to be up to the church, and so that's why we have to pray every day that people see that the good things happening in Catholic school are important to the community, to the civic life of our communities, but most importantly to our church. And so if people can believe in that and get behind that, we will be fine, and I think they will, because our church needs our schools, and our schools are treasures. And they're taking care of our youngest members of our faith, and we are growing that faith in them. And that just is good things for the future of our church and our communities.
Thank you, Kathleen. Now it's a pleasure to introduce the man from whom I have learned everything I know about early education, Kevin Ryan, who is Emeritus Professor of Education at Boston University. Kevin.
Thank you very much, Mary Ann. Tom Monahan has left the room apparently, but I wanted to thank him not only for all the things he's done to improve education in this state, but also reminded me of 8 years of wonderful Wednesday afternoons, because while he was moving from the public school down to a parochial school, me in a parochial school was let out at 1 o'clock, and we had a free afternoon on Wednesdays for 8 years, and to go out to the ball fields and the gyms while we used to call them the prods. The public school kids were educated by our nuns. So thank you, Tom. I want to make really 3 points. The first point is that the noble educational project, the public schools of the United States, is a failure. And second, I want to talk about a point that Mary Ann mentioned, and that's the idea of the state controlling education. And third, to just suggest that maybe today, this very week, this very month, is the time for Catholics and Christians to really press the issue of choice. So my first point is about the failure of the curriculum project. And this is with an enormous appreciation for the work of public educators who are struggling, but they are trapped in a curriculum that we were seeing the ultimate, most modern interpretation of it with the Common Core. But they are captured by a failed effort to respond to really the ultimate educational question. And as a curricular question is, what is most worth knowing? What are we going to present to the young? In our state, in our country, the public education was really begun by the desire of the Pilgrims in the 17th century to provide an answer to that question, what's most worth knowing? They were caught in this lonely, isolated, rocky area in little villages surrounded by forests, and they were deeply concerned that their children were going to grow up as savages. So they band together and they went to the legislature and they asked for an act that's really started the idea of public education. And they started schools, and they started schools not for vocational interests, but to put children in a position where they could read the Bible, because the Bible answered for them the ultimate questions of life. And so we've had in American education this beginning of biblical Christianity that proceeded all through the colonial period, and then the founding fathers, who were themselves classically educated, realized that if this new experiment, this crazy idea of democracy was going to take hold, they had to educate people to what Jefferson, who was referenced earlier, called the high moral responsibility of democracy. People had to be able to recognize what good laws were, who were good people, and it wasn't just a matter of becoming effective burghers or tradesmen, but it was to be able to live up to the requirement of democracy. And that tradition of sort of secular and biblical education was very much picked up by Horace Mann. Horace Mann, the father of the common schools, really changed those schools, though. And he saw the schools as a vehicle to socialize, if you will, these new immigrants that were coming to the country, the Germans and the Irish, who had no tradition of democracy. That was really the beginning of a withdrawal of the schools from a recognition and the place of religion. And in the 20th century, we saw John Dewey come in, not a great philosopher, but someone who has had a profound effect on the way education is done in our country. And his project was to really address the social issues, and what he needed to do is sort of wean the schools away from teaching religion. That really, we could carry that right up to the 21st century, when all of a sudden the government has gotten terribly robust, terribly interested in answering that question, what's most worth knowing. So we've seen a shrinking of any sort of acknowledgement of ultimate issues. A child can go through 12 years of education and never be asked, what is a human person? What is a worthy life? Is there anything beyond the material? So what I'm suggesting, and I want to quote our earlier speaker, Tony Esselon, who was part of this, the project that brings us here today, in talking about the curriculum. And by the way, I want to acknowledge a soaring bit of contribution to that report. It's just beautiful ideas and beautiful prose. But at one point, he refers to the Common Core as to sever mankind from any profound attention or attraction to the transcendentals, the true, the good, and the beautiful. A vision that is strictly utilitarian, man with a soul amputated. Man with a soul amputated. I think that really captures what that whole project is about. Well, let me quickly move on, and I'll try to be much quicker about the point Mary Ann made about the state control of education. a mill was really a great prophet, and not many people paid much attention to him, because what we've seen is a increasing role of the state in answering that question, what is most worth knowing? We've seen, and we've seen this picture before in education. The Spartans were a perfect example, but in the 20th century, we've seen Hitler grab control of the schools to make the new Nazi. We've seen Stalin do the same thing to educate the new citizen. We've seen the same thing with Mao. And what we're seeing in this country increasingly is that the central government is trying to do the same thing in our country. And I think this is something that we really have to do. Now, of course, a state has a role in educating citizens for the common good. But what I'm suggesting is that the state should limit itself to providing the resources, but to start meddling to provide the ultimate questions. By the way, I was thinking about the ultimate questions. One of the, Paul Ely talked about having children know that they were born, that they're living, and that they're going to die. My former boss and my friend, the late John Silber, president of Boston University, once said to me, although he was a great supporter of the public schools, on the other hand, he was a great critic, and he said, I won't quote him because it's a little profane, but he said, those blank blank public schools, why don't they teach kids the ultimate thing they need to know, that they're going to die? A very John Silber kind of approach. So what I'm suggesting is ask the state to provide the resources, but keep your hands off those ultimate questions. And finally, a quick point about the fact that we live in a moment when the country is, we voted for many things in this election, but one of them was choice, a realization that we need to start giving parents, the first educators, the control of where they want their children to educate. So we should hold their feet to the fire on that. Thank you. I'm sorry I went so long.
Thank you, Kevin, and thank you for winding up with a topic on which our next speaker is an expert. Patrick Wolf is the Distinguished Professor of Education Policy at the University of Arkansas and an expert, among many other things, on school voucher programs.
Well, thank you, Mary Ann, and thanks to my good friends in the Pioneer Institute. I'm delighted to be part of this vital discussion about Catholic schools and the liberal arts. I am a product of 24 years of formal education, the first 17 of which were exclusively in Catholic schools. And that was a tremendous blessing and gift for me to help ground me and prepare me for my career as a social scientist studying schools and education and the governance systems for delivering education. In the 20 years that I've toiled in this vineyard, I feel like I've learned four things. One, as Father Rutler mentioned in the Q&A, is that there is a Catholic school brand. There's a sort of defined corporate brand to Catholic schools. It includes vital elements like a rigorous curriculum grounded in the liberal arts, universally high expectations of all students, part of our shared status as saints and sinners in this world. Strict order and discipline was initially instituted by the nuns, but has carried on through the lay people who now teach and occupy most of the staff positions in Catholic schools. And of course, a religious environment, a religious ethos, a values-rich environment for the education of the whole person, as Paul Ely mentioned. So that is the Catholic school brand. And what we've seen around the country is when Catholic schools embrace and nurture and promote that brand, they tend to be successful. And when they run away from it, they tend to fail and close. So one thing I've learned is there is a Catholic school brand. Second thing I've learned is it's on the wane, and that's sad. We've heard the statistics, 1,300 Catholic schools closed since 1990. Catholic schools have the massive challenge of having to compete against a free good. The public schools are free. Catholic schools require tuition, require a contribution from the family, and so they have to be that much better, that much more attractive for families because their competitors are so heavily subsidized. In fact, just in Mass yesterday, I was handed this flyer, Catholic Schools Scholarship Appeal. Even with parish subsidies and constant fundraising, cost is a barrier to hundreds of families who can't afford a Catholic education for their child. Increased enrollment improves the outlook for our schools. Can you help close the gap? The gap in Arkansas, $3.6 million is the need to maintain the enrollments, particularly of low-income students in our Catholic schools. This is in a poor state with the lowest percentage of Catholics of any state in the U.S., and they're desperate for $3.6 million, which leads us to Kevin's point about the need for public subsidies in the form of private school choice initiatives, school vouchers, tax credit scholarships, education savings accounts. And that's what I've been studying over the past 15 years. And basically what I found is that access to private school choice, which primarily is through Catholic schooling. Catholic schools are the main instrument for delivering private school choice across the country. That this has a profound effect on both students and on parents. In terms of students, their test scores tend to be higher if they have access to private school choice. It's not as consistent and overwhelming a finding as some people might hope, but it does tend to be positive. The more consistent and profound effect that Catholic schools have, that private schools have in choice environments, is impacts on these deeper sort of quality of life factors such as educational attainment. That is, how long a student remains engaged in the educational project. Private school choice programs have a powerful positive impact on high school graduation rates, college enrollment rates, college persistence rates. And finally, access to private schools through choice has a consistent positive effect on civic values, on political tolerance, on community involvement, on political activity. And this is sort of, the man bites dog story about school choice, because the arguments made by Dewey and Amy Gutman and others are that we must exclusively subsidize and nurture public schools because they are going to support the public purposes of education. That's hogwash. Private schools have a long tradition of promoting the public purposes of education, and they do it better than public schools do. Finally, I love the metaphor that Paul Ely uses of pilgrimage, because my colleague Thomas Stewart and I, when we engaged on a series of focus groups and interviews of highly disadvantaged families participating in the Opportunity Scholarship Program in Washington, D.C. This is a school voucher program targeted to low-income urban families in our nation's capital. And in the end, we decided to call our book The School Choice Journey, because we realized that the experience of school choice for disadvantaged parents is a journey. It's a journey from a mentality of clientelism, of government giving you things and demanding that you do things in a certain way, in a very paternalistic way, to a prospect or a project of empowerment, of being informed consumers of education and ultimately being more active citizens in the Republic. And the real test of this came at the end of our story when Congress tried to shut down the Opportunity Scholarship Program, tried to take away school vouchers from these low-income minority families. And they rose up in protest, thousands of them in rallies. This is a demographic that's not supposed to be politically involved, not supposed to be politically influential. And ultimately, they triumphed with the reauthorization of the program in 2011. So that's 21 years of scholarship sort of distilled to 6 or 7 minutes, and I hope that these lessons resonate with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Here in Massachusetts, the prospects for having school choice are perhaps more bleak than in many other parts of the United States. So I wanted to mention a situation in Kansas that I think deserves to be better known. I recently had the occasion to visit Kansas City and to speak with the bishop there, and to learn to my astonishment that in this part of the country where Catholics are a minority and surrounded by tithing Protestants, the Catholic population has begun to tithe. I know this is Massachusetts, so don't get nervous, but the Catholic population has tithed to the extent that the bishop told me that they can offer a Catholic education in Catholic schools, not only through K through 12, but through seminary. So something to think about. Now, I'm going to just ask a couple of kind of devil's advocate questions, and then we'll have some questions from the audience. And my first question is this. We all want our students to succeed in this republic. And what are we to make of the fact that the Common Core curriculum was devised by the same person who apparently has been instrumental in revising the college boards and SATs? So how do we respond to the concern that must be expressed by some parents? If my children go to a Catholic school, will they really be able to compete in this world that has been constructed by bureaucrats with other aims than ours? Yes.
We do receive that question frequently. The first thing that I would like to say to all parents is that you're our partners with us, and so we care very much about what you think. It matters to us how you believe your child should be educated. The other thing I would say is good writing is good writing is good writing and will be recognized. People who write well, it will show up on the SAT writing exam. People who do math well, it will show up on the SAT math exam. So a good education kind of test-proofs you a bit. Do I think children who are maybe have average skills in those areas, they may be at a little bit of a disadvantage, some of them, if they're not good test takers. But I truly believe that if you are well educated, it will show up on the SAT, the ACT, or whatever test you want to take. And the other thing I would say is, if your child is not a good test taker and doesn't matter where they're educated, they probably need a test prep course, because you can learn some of those skills that you need to do well on a test. And it's sad, but that's the truth of it. If you suffer or don't do as well on tests as other people, you can learn those skills just like you can learn how to dribble a basketball or hit a ball. It's definitely true.
Even in the public school, parents and young people do test preparation to get in the game. But I think it's imperative that an education with the school of the Catholic identity has to be as good, if not better. We have a responsibility. It's not just to give them content, but to give them the incredible powers of mind they need to tackle anything. And we do 7 years of Shakespeare, grades 6 through 12. We have an In the Footsteps of Dante program. I mean, there's so much opportunity to go deep, and I think we never want to sell our souls to a program. We've got to be players. We've got to be wise as serpents. We cannot put our heads down at all, but we fundamentally have to be transforming minds and hearts. It's like C.S. Lewis and his Abolition of Man. You know, we've got to win the chest. We've got to win over magnanimity. We have to help them fall in love with the great questions, the things that will really motivate them to keep studying, to conquer, whether it's a standardized test or competition for an elite university. So our students do well. They will continue to do well as long as we don't compromise on what we're committed to as the highest standards of excellence.
So here's a related question. We're told that nearly half of all Catholic schools have adopted the Common Core curriculum. And that seems to be symptomatic of a deeper problem, which is the increasing temptations towards secularization of the Catholic schools. And I know that the educators here are not involved in that, but what can be done to keep Catholic schools Catholic?
In my previous job, I worked for the National Catholic Educational Association, and I would say I would question the 50% adopting the Common Core curriculum. I think they adopted the standards, which says in first grade they're going to be able to add and subtract through 20. That's a standard that I want all kids to have. That's the standard that Catholic schools in Boston have. We think that's a good standard. So I think they've adopted those standards. They want the kids, as Karen said, we want those students performing at the highest levels, that or above. But most Catholic schools rejected the curriculum that went with the standards. And I think that's a difference that gets overlooked sometimes, because I know a lot of Catholic schools say, the standards, yeah, I want my students to know that, but I'm not using these books to get there. I'm not using these methods to get there. So I know in Boston anyway, that's true. We want the highest standards for our students, but we're not we're not at all really engaged in using the materials recommended or the teaching strategies recommended. That's not everywhere, but I know a lot of dioceses around the country who said yes to the standards, no to everything else.
Thanks, Kathleen. That's very reassuring.
And
There are
if
lots of diocesan schools that have either rejected the Common Core or are rethinking their commitment to them. And so I think we're seeing not only in Catholic circles, but also in educational circles in general, a great rejection of the Common Core.
in social science parlance, there's a phenomenon called institutional isomorphism. And it's basically the tendency for organizations to develop a sameness or to simply ape other organizations. And it's deadly in the area of K-12 education and school choice because sameness, educational sameness, it's bad for kids. You know, different kids are a different match for a variety of educational approaches. It's bad for parents because it limits their options. It's definitely bad for Catholic schools because if the Catholic school is the same as a public school, except it costs $10,000 a year, no one's going to opt for that. So Catholic schools really need to dare to be different and distinguish themselves in their curriculum and in their pedagogy, and certainly in the rich value system that they nurture in their school environment. And I think they should be fleeing from Common Core because it's bad for them.
Thank you, Patrick. So I have some questions from the audience. Professor Scarry?
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I've enjoyed all the panels and the panelists. My name is Peter Scarry. I teach political science at Boston College. And unlike Tom Birmingham, I'm not a product of Chelsea, but I'm a product of nearby Medford, where I didn't go to parochial schools, but I certainly am the product of St. Francis of Assisi Parish and the Sisters of Charity there. But I want to pose a somewhat different kind of question. A question of someone who's extremely sympathetic to what I've heard this morning. But I would like to hear the panelists address some of what I see as the obstacles to what you're proposing. From where I sit, teaching at Boston College, I see a Catholic hierarchy that has been resistant to Catholic education and that has now, in more recent years, is financially and I think psychologically shell-shocked by the child abuse and sex scandals. So I would like to hear some practical suggestions from the panelists about how they see that, that challenge. Do they see it differently than I just posed it? It seems to me that the challenge that we face is more than simply getting rid of the Blaine Amendment or public financing. It's not clear to me that even with public financing, there's the necessary level of leadership within the Catholic Church to effectuate what I think most of us in this room would like to see happen.
Who wants to take that on?
Well, I'm going to take on a piece of it. I think the residual impact is just a discouragement, distrust among parents. Should we bother seeking Catholic education, supporting Catholic education? Is this the right thing to do? So we need to rebuild the vision of everyone who has weathered this storm. And so what Catholic education will really provide my children, that sets it apart. And we need to look at some different kinds of models. First, we need to support the leadership chain in Catholic schools. We need people with a strong vision who are going to be uncompromising, shaping a culture. And then we need to look at other models of, our school is a parent-sponsored school. It was founded by Harvard Business School colleagues who are all parents and educators with a commitment to passing on the faith to their children. So we need to find ways not to throw the baby out with the bathwater. The church can't do it. There's not the money. We've got to look at what this treasure means and how sustaining it and passing it on will work. And we've got to think outside of the box. Not all of the old models will go forward unless they're distinctive, faithful to the brand. I like the brand. And even within that brand, they dare to go deeper. So that's just a preliminary response.
I'm not sure I fully got the question, but one of the brute facts about education is it's very expensive. Nationally, we spend $12,000 per year per public school student. In this city, in this state, it's $15,000. In Washington, D.C., not surprisingly, it's $20,000. Now, I just cannot see going forward how Catholic education can survive against those odds. We have 10 grandchildren, all of whom are being homeschooled at an extraordinary expense. They can't afford Catholic schools because Catholic schools are just, they're much, they can't compete with the public school, but they don't want to send their children there, but they can't afford to put their kids in Catholic schools. So the brute fact is that we're in a very expensive educational environment, and if we're going to survive educating our children, we've got to find some answer. And I think that's the sort of thing that Paul was talking about.
I would just add that when I came back from Kansas City and heard about the tithing system there, I was thinking, well, could that ever be done in a state like Massachusetts, where there is the problem that Professor Scarry mentioned and just the general tax situation? But I would say if it were ever possible to convince people that this would be an alternative for us here, it would have to be a system in which the contributions were made not to the general funds, but to a special dedicated fund. But it would be worth, what I would say is be worth throwing the idea out. I said to the Bishop of Kansas City, hasn't this ever been publicized? Catholics don't, it has been.
Yes.
But in the National Catholic Register, and we need to, I mean, somehow we need to put it out there so that people can think seriously. Which would be harder, to get the constitutional amendment repealed or to get people to step up to the plate and make Catholic education affordable for everybody? Another question from, yes, sir.
Several of the past Pioneer Institute programs that we've been to, basically, I posed this question once before, and perhaps you guys could allude a little deeper, is that in our universities, and it's getting worse and worse, it's going down into the primary and secondary schools, is the teaching of this hatred of America. Everything American is bad. We teach about slavery and how horrible it is. We always teach about everything that is bad, and we never talk about the positives of America and how we grew out of all of this and became a better nation. And some of the things that were alluded to earlier was that, and perhaps this is the second part of the question, the first part being, why do we do that? Why do we teach that in our schools? The second part of the question being, and it was alluded to, is that, is it made easier because we don't teach our children, as was said earlier, a sense of self? We don't give them that ability to, well, yes, read poetry, read classics, critically think, even daydream and just wonder about the world that they live in. Does that create an empty vessel, a vacuum within that child, thus making it easier to pour in all this negativity, thus bringing us to where we are today? And how does the Catholic school change that dynamic?
Well, going back to John Dewey, who his project was to rid the school of what he called the cold hand of tradition, and the emphasis on education was to solve social problems, to adopt a progressive agenda, and the very fact of being a progressive, you want to change the bad things. And so we have an attitude that in the schools that really is unaware of the past and is unsatisfied with the present, some of which is good, but I think it's ultimately rather empty.
I remember at the very start of my comprehensive oral exams as a doctoral student at Harvard University in political science, the very first question that Sid Verba asked me, he said, I'm getting on a train to New York to give a talk on American exceptionalism. What should I say? He's probably not throwing that out to the graduate students now, but that was a big part of my own education, was the idea of American exceptionalism. But at the same time, I mean, I think we need to be careful here and remember what Tony said in his presentation about the fact that we do live in a world with lots of rich cultures and enriching experiences. And what we need to do is we need to acknowledge the subjective and value that where it exists, but we also need to strive for the objective, for the universal truths of human existence that transcend different cultures. And so it doesn't help us in that project to demean and distance ourselves from our own historical and political culture. We don't need to do that in order to appreciate and embrace the truths from other cultures. And I think the people who are really pushing the political correctness too far, there's this sense that you have to empty out the American in order to refill them with another set of values and another set of culture. No, you don't. That's ridiculous. That's not how human beings work, and that's certainly not what we should aspire to.
Well, we're going to have to bring this program to an end, and I think it would be good to, I'm afraid we're running out of time, but to end on a positive note. We are living here in a state where students are in the public schools are said to have the best education in the nation, and we're living in a diocese where Catholic schools outperform the best in nation public schools. So we aren't starting from a low base. And the persons who are on the panel today have had a great deal to do with making Catholic education so successful here in Massachusetts. So please thank them and the Pioneer Institute.
Great pleasure to meet you. I appreciate your comments.
Well, we're just on the verge of concluding the program, and I want to express a heartfelt thank you to all of the people who participated. Thank you very much. It was a very high caliber discussion, and all those who made presentations. There's one last thing that remains, and that is Father Rutler and Professors Eli, Esselin, and Glendon will be signing their books toward the back of the room. So anybody who wants to visit them for the book signing can do so. I also want to thank the members of the audience for your attendance and your attention and for your participation. You made it a better program. Thank you all very, very much.
Well, it's great to meet you.